problems.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Harwich Finance Committee meeting for Thursday, November 10th, 2022. It is 6 o'clock. And for the first time in a long time, we actually had 9 members of full board with us this evening. I want to remind everybody that this meeting is live streamed and recorded. And so I want you to know that as we go forward. So you're all on TV. Anything you say can be held against you, right? Okay. We have no, just following the agenda, we have no minutes of previous meetings to consider this evening. I do want to introduce our 2 new members, Michelle Gallucci.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Michelle.
And Bob McCready.
Hello, everybody.
Appointed by the moderator just after town meeting. Let's see, Michelle, I see you shuffling through some things. So Bob, why don't you just give us 2 minutes of who Bob McCready is, and so we understand a background.
I've lived in Harwich now permanently for going on 20 years. Previously had spent some time in town committees in the Housing Authority, and through the Community Preservation Committee for a number of years, and was also for 10 years the Chief Financial Officer at Housing Assistance Corporation. So,
Okay, Michelle?
Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Gallucci, and I've lived permanently in Harwich since 2019. I was born and raised in Norwood, Mass. I left for about 25 years, and I worked in the pharmaceutical industry and in biotech, and I did finance and business development. So, pleasure to meet you.
Okay.
Great.
Anybody have any serious questions to ask them that we might want to investigate before we go forward?
No.
Welcome.
Okay, welcome and thank you. You know, the process, particularly for you, Michelle, of going through where we are today to where we get to town meeting in the spring, it'll be fascinating. It's complicated once we get going, which is after the first of the year. Once the selectmen get their budget, put together, and we have something to start to work with. It is our job to protect the financial interests of the town, and I think we do that effectively. And I think hopefully you'll learn a lot and you'll enjoy a lot as we go forward. In the winter, there tend to be lots of meetings just because almost everybody who has a budget comes to see us to explain their budget and that type of thing. So, but we'll go through that process as we move forward. So part of our responsibility.
Can I make a plug?
Sure.
On the Finance Committee's website, there's a strategic plan, very brief, but it might be something you want to check out.
Right. I've also started reading the book you gave me. So.
Oh, the handbook from the state. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Great read.
It takes a while to get there.
There's a lot there. I will say that you'll learn that municipal financing, different terminology, different ways of doing things. Sometimes you scratch your head and say, why do they do it that way? But it's a format that you need to follow. You want to pass it over there. Okay, so as part of the responsibility of the Finance Committee, to certain boards and committees, did you give my copy away?
No, yes. You gave
Yeah,
me 2 to go over there. I just have
2
them.
extras I did.
Oh, good. Give them up here. Thank you. Thank you. We have what we call liaisons from the Finance Committee to different boards and committees. And the purpose of the liaison is to make sure that it's clear that there is a path of communication to work through for the different boards and committees, so that they have questions on their budget or how our process is going to work or not. Liaison from the Finance Committee should be the first one contacted to try to resolve any issue or whatever, but then sometimes bring it here for discussion, and we'll talk about a couple of those this evening. We had started in the summer with a list of departments and committees and FinCom liaisons, knowing that we had 2 members to fill, knowing that Dana hadn't taken any yet. Please note that in the minutes. No, okay. And so what
Dana, note that in the minutes.
So what you have in front of you is a list we came up with. I won't say out of desperation, but we did. And so, so tonight, I think we could ask our new members to take one, maybe. We could ask some of our existing members if they want to give up any, and try and get this list solidified along. So, anybody want to give up one of their spots? Dana, you don't have one.
Well, I would like to take one. I'd like to add one if we could.
Go ahead, we can add whatever we
There's
want.
a fairly new committee, the Utilities and Climate Committee.
Really?
And one of their members approached me and asked about, just wanted to know why we don't have more electric vehicles in town. And because I know a lot of the history of what we have done in the past, I was able to tell them where
It's
we
one of
are.
your house, isn't there?
Highway, how the police cruisers go from police cruisers, frontline cruisers, to regular cruisers, to other departments, and then get traded in for other
Okay,
stuff.
so you would like to get appointed to be
Yeah.
the liaison for utilities and climate.
If
Okay.
that's something somebody would like to do?
Okay, so we have planning board, real estate, and open space committee need slots. Either of you have an interest in that?
You get pick first.
You don't have to be an expert, you just have to be a channel for communications, basically.
Okay, you take the other one.
You mean between planning board and the real estate? I'll take the real estate. and open
Okay,
space.
that has to do with, you know, consideration and purchasing of land for open space and that type of
That's a good
thing,
one.
so. Okay,
I said that's a good one.
you think that's a good one?
I was just saying to Michelle, that's
Yeah,
a good one.
yeah, good. And Bob, you on planning board?
Sure.
Okay,
Dive right in.
I have a correction. It is the Energy and Climate Action Committee, not the Utilities and Climate.
Okay,
Committee.
energy.
that's good. In that case, I don't know if Dana wants to be on it. Action committee? Is that what you said?
Climate Action Committee,
Climate Action Committee,
ECAC.
ECAT. Okay. All right, let's see, at the moment, I have 3, wastewater, police, and fire. If anybody wants to take one of, oh, I'll keep wastewater and wastewater. If anybody has a desire to get involved with the police or fire, I'll be happy to give that up, but you don't have to. I'm just throwing that out there, because we, again, filled this out, just trying to get bodies in place at that time. Everybody happy the way it is? Yeah, you're all shaking your heads, 'cause-
Works for me.
huh?
I said it works for me.
Okay, all right. Everybody
I'll
good?
assist you on police and fire. if you
You're gonna
want that.
assist me, okay.
you want some help with
I have
it.
an assistant, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, for Michelle and Bob, what I typically say to our liaisons is, at some point, it's not necessary to jump into it right away, but notify the chairman of that, or chairperson of that committee, just that you are the liaison from the finance committee, and trade contact information, just, you know. It's always good to show up at least one of their meetings and just introduce yourself. You don't have to be at every meeting. It's kind of like if they have a need or you have a need, then you may attend the meeting, that type of thing. So it's not meant to be burdensome. It's just meant to ease the process of communications. Okay?
Peter, who's covering the Energy and Climate Action Committee?
That would be Dana, who
Okay.
put his hand up right away and
He's a
said,
go-getter, that guy.
do you want to assist him? Okay. Anything else on that? All right, so under liaison reports, I put this on here because some of you liaisons have been doing your thing. And Karen, I know, excuse me, you have golf, and I know you've had some financial, you know, discussions or
Yeah.
or whatnot. We don't need all the details. Maybe give us a summary of where you might be with the golf folks.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the golf world. Part of it is they're proposing new rates for next year. Part of it is they're getting ready to come to the Capital Outlay Committee meeting for to do their presentation. So we did get some information as part of this rates and fees discussion that was financially related from the director of golf over there. And pretty interesting. So I have some outstanding questions that I shared with you, and I haven't been able to get them answered yet. So I tried to get it through the select board liaison to the golf committee, and then that didn't work. I know they're buried. And so I forwarded that same note. I think I forgot to copy this morning, I think, to Joe, and just said, if you have any information, it would be relevant. And what I'm referring to is there's a golf improvement fund, and there's a golf infrastructure revitalization fund, and part of the membership money goes into these funds for every member, but I'm not sure what the balance is. I'm not sure. One of the funds was created for a project that's already done, so I don't know if it's going to stay open. So I wanted to get some guidance from the director of finance from the town to say, I'll back up 1 second. So one of the capital items that they're bringing forth is around the irrigation system, and the reference in there is that they'll use monies, the funding source would be from the golf improvement fund. So, but the project's 1.2 million. I can't imagine there's that much in there. So I'm trying to find out what's in there, and then are we going to keep them both open, and are they sort of legitimate funding sources for capital and all that stuff? So I'm still sort of working towards those answers, and I'm sure we'll get them. One of the other points is that the golf committee or the golf team is coming to the capital meeting next Monday. So I'm going to ask all the questions there if I don't have the answers.
Capital Outlay Committee meeting?
Yeah, the Capital
Monday.
Outlay
Okay.
Committee, which is a good,
Okay.
there's 4 different groups coming. That's one that's really
Yep.
good, and I think that we might get some answers there.
Okay, so let me just throw some out here. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I don't know if you remember, but a couple months ago, we started with a process that said, hey, if this group, this team, has any questions or whatnot for the town, basically, we should funnel those through me to the town administrator, okay? So this week, and I think I copied you on it, Karen, there was some discussion. I went to Joe Powers, who's the town administrator, and said, hey, we need to start, to help us with capital outlay, we need a debt schedule.
Right.
And so he got back to me and said, well, you know, because the finance director, because I asked to get information from the finance director, is not a direct report to him. The finance director is a direct report to the Board of Selectmen.
Oh.
He said, please go to her directly, which I did, and you saw that, I think, on the
On that report, yeah.
on
yeah.
that report, okay? So I had a correspondence yesterday, just to be transparent about it, with the finance director, and she said, basically, I have many different versions of what a capital plan might be, and I can't find any record from the previous finance director as to what she actually sent to the finance committee. So could you please tell me what you're looking for? So I will tell you that, and I'm just trying to remember what I told her, basically was we want a summary that says, okay, here's our debt schedule today in total. Pick a number. We owe $50 million, and every year it looks like this, you know, debt service and principal for the next 40 years. I asked her to go out 40 years, right? No, 20 years. And I said, then we want to have that in a format that we could build a model for the finance committee use and share with anybody else. It would say, as we take the capital items that need borrowing, for instance, make a projection on timing as to when that borrowing may take place, throw a dart at the wall and say, what's the cost of capital at that point? Who knows, right? And what the term would be. And try and figure out what the impact on the tax rate, i.e. the taxpayers, will be going forward for all this stuff. That's simple. I got to her with that yesterday. She said she was going to try and flip it around today. I didn't get anything by the time I came here, but I would expect I'm going to get something soon. And then as we talk tonight about the other reports that we have asked for financially, I do have a concept in my head that I will ask her and say, hey, maybe you and I, Karen, as the chair and vice chair, may go visit with her and sit down and say, for each one, this is sort of what we think we need. And that way she'll have a better understanding and hopefully give us what we need, right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I think that, you know, I'm going to try and work that relationship, and we'll see if it ever gets cut off or not, but
No, but I think that's
try
great,
it.
because we could obviously go to her with some of the questions that I have, and, I mean, they're related.
She would be able to figure out the balance on different accounts. I mean, that's her job, so.
Yeah, and the other thing, the other question, well, not question, but the other thing that's come up a lot in the golf world relative to finances is a lot of questions back to the director of golf about, does the course make money or not, right? Because around town, some people say, oh, it makes a lot of money. Other people say it doesn't make money. So there's that whole ongoing question, and I think that's been sorted out, in my opinion. So technically, yes. And I have the list over the past 7 years, how much has been sort of made by the course. But that money, there's been a long agreement that that money will go towards indirect costs for the town, not just for the golf course, but so that money comes pushed back to the town, which essentially makes the golf course break even in some ways. Magic, I think. But
Sounds familiar.
but
This is part of the new terminology you're going to use, sort of like.
But it's indirect costs and shared services, so I have a better sense of that. But, I mean, just as an example, just this year alone, there's going to be an excess of $600,000 that gets pushed back to the town for those things, which is really interesting. And then when you start talking about capital, you go, could we use some, whatever. There's all these questions that come up, so I don't want to get into them here, but I think it's interesting, to say the least.
As a liaison, you may suggest back to your committee, the golf committee, that it may behoove them to come up with a simple, either graphic or one-page look at what golf income and expenses are, what the net, you know what I mean?
I have
simple.
that.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be coming from you.
No, I
It
trust.
should be coming from the golf committee or the director of golf, because they're
it
the
came
ones
from
that should
Roman.
be, you know, saying, here it is.
Yeah, it came from Roman. So I was just using his information to,
But it's in a form that the average person who asks the question you're asking gets a clear answer.
no, because
Okay.
it's the numbers, but it doesn't answer the questions about the funds or the use of the excess money at the end of the year, or how that goes. So it doesn't answer that kind of
All I'm
stuff.
saying is just some simple way,
Yeah,
just a
agreed.
suggestion,
No,
some
it's
simple
fair.
way for them to present their financials, good, bad, or indifferent, you know, whatever the answer is, because you're right, people do ask that question. I ran into somebody the other day and said, oh, we lose money every year. I said, what do you mean?
No, we don't.
Uh,
Yeah, and so I think it's good stuff. I mean, we're learning a lot of good stuff, and I
Okay.
think they're getting a little, that there's stuff going on in that committee, and the committee chair actually stepped down just yesterday, so that's like breaking news. He
Oh.
resigned. So I think it's moving in a direction where I think more stuff will be put on the table, and everybody will have a common understanding versus pockets of information. So I think all of that's good
Okay.
as it relates to.
Ann?
Getting back to your statement that the finance director reports to the board now, that's a change, I would assume. No?
I don't think so.
No,
It's always-
been that way for
Yeah,
decades.
that's the way the
Yeah.
charter shows it, yeah.
The
There are certain
selectmen have-
direct reports, you know, for instance, the police and fire chiefs report directly to the Board of Selectmen. The finance director does, maybe
Town
some other-
administrator.
Town administrator, yeah,
Those are the four.
Did not know that.
yeah. So, anyhow,
That's
so,
that's what I got.
Not
okay?
sure that's right, but
Yeah, well,
It
it's
is
the
what it
charter,
is.
it's the charter, so,
yeah.
yeah. Anything else on golf? Capital outlay, you guys have anything you want to tell us? I know you have a meeting
Podcast
next
and
week,
stuff.
and, yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead, Mark.
We had our second site visit yesterday.
Site visit of,
What site?
240, I'll start with 214 Cecil Road.
204.
204.
204.
I'm sorry.
The
You moved
20
it?
The 204.
You mean the old middle school?
The old middle school, brought back memories from parent-teachers night. But we had our second visit there. Because there's municipal employees going in there, Sean, the facilities director, said he has to institute life safety things. So this year, they have a budget of $1.5 million, a new furnace, fire alarm system.
You mean in capital outlay?
They're
Capital.
requesting capital.
Yeah, not a budget, but just,
Yeah, and capital.
Capital.
Furnace, fire alarm system, and one other life safety thing, this doesn't come right to mind, and a generator. So, and the following year, he has $650,000 for the mansard, the slope roof in the front of it, and that's something where I think the finance committee can help. He says he's gonna replace it with a slate roof. I do think there are architectural asphalt shingles that could give a very good look. It would be quite a bit less, so that's something as it gets closer. But just a summary from what I put together, he has estimated capital cost of $2.5 million roughly through fiscal year '26. He is going to start window replacement, but he just put in the budget just a small portion of that. And there are still requests to come in for what he calls the West Wing, or Joe calls the West Wing, which is the cafeteria, the gym, and the performance center. We're still waiting for capital requests to come in there, generated by the new. So there's still some more costs to come in. I projected, with the many contingencies and unknowns that we don't know, if I was to take that $2.5 million and work in a 50% contingency, so that over the next 5 years, you could have a cost of $4 million. And what would that basically would do? Would give you a building with a tight building envelope with heat and fire safety. It would not provide for year-round usage in terms of air conditioning. The temperature, Sean reports during the summer is mid to high 80s, high humidity. So at the end of 5 years, you'd have a building that would be tight, and I think the performance end of it, the capital costs that are going to come in, you'd have a very functional building. One thing that he didn't address in his capital plan, because he needs direction if that's going to be, if there's going to be additional HVAC work, which would be air conditioning. He estimated that, you know, easily could, with the combination of the 4 or 5 million that we may have already, another 5 million. As he said, he could easily put 10 million into that building. So, you know, that's basically it. Over the next 5 years, this is just rough figures, and I'm just,
I understand.
you know, we're not a...
You're just sharing.
Yep.
It's okay.
Over the next 5 years, you could put 5 million in there, you'd have a nice tight building, heat, maybe not the control system in there to modulate the heat and stuff, like no air conditioning, and you could have a pretty functional building for at least 9 months of the year.
Was there any discussion about, I don't even know what wing it is, but the back wing or whatever, where I keep hearing that's where we're going to put municipal employees? So,
I don't know where they're gonna put them.
but I mean, is there a layout or anything?
No,
There's
not
There's
yet.
no tenant
There's no
fit out.
plan. Okay.
And there's no idea of what they're gonna do for petitions if they go in
Yeah,
there, or.
okay.
He did mention that if there's a town engineer or surveyor hired, they would be down there, but I didn't hear anything about a large contingent yet, but, so that's it on, 204.
And I think
Let me-
from Sean's standpoint, his mission is to just, I mean, not just, but to identify what the needs are, right? Based on what assumptions are for the use of the building. It's not his role to put a whole plan together that says this is what I'll call the old middle school, the community center, or 204, whatever it is. That's with the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah,
at this
the
point.
good news, just so I can, what I learned and I'm finding encouraging, because up till now it's been, you know, we've been wondering about the plan. So Joe's been working very closely with the new director of cultural affairs,
Yep.
the Eric Beebe from the Recreation Department, and one other person,
Sean,
I
of
can't remember,
course.
another one of his people who are talking about what do they need, what do they want to use the building for. So there's a lot
Sure.
of good conversation going, and as I understand it, the town administrator, Joe, as well as some of his people are coming to the select board meeting on the 21st of November, and they're going to be presenting what they've been working on for 204 citizens. So I think that's good for any of us who want to attend, because this is a hot topic.
Yep, sure.
And anybody who's watching this or may watch this, I
Sure.
think that's really going to be a good, very informative kind of what
Sure.
have they been doing up to this point.
Sure, and our role at this point in time, just to be clear, is through the Capital Outlay Committee.
Yeah.
We have 2 liaisons to it. There will be a joint meeting on the 5th of December with the Board of Selectmen, Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee to hear the capital plan.
Correct.
And it's very appropriate at that point to be asking the kind of questions, you know, that we have. It's also, I think, if we have a debt schedule that we have in place and a model at that point in time, it would be helpful just to work through
Yeah.
some of that stuff at that point. But it's an opportunity to get as much information as we can.
Yeah, I think that'll
you
be
know.
good timing for, sort of trying to bring this whole capital picture for the whole thing, but specifically for 204 Sisson.
Right.
Bring our perspective on all that together.
Right. Now, did Sean pull that, walking that site inspection together? Who did that? Was that Joe?
Joe organized it. I wasn't there because I was away.
Okay.
But Mark was
Yeah,
there.
no,
I heard it was
Joe
really
may have
good.
organized, but
Oh,
the
the gym is the other
Cultural
part. Okay.
Affairs Director was there, Sean.
Good.
It was good, but, so we've vetted out the fire department, the police department, the harbor master. Maybe when we get back and forth, I've brought up the question about Allen Harbor, about cost sharing, since I've said over 70% of that harbor is private use. But, so we have a few more, we have the Harwich Elementary School next week, we've done the police department, we've done public works, so we've gone through quite a bit. And,
Was Rich there today, or whenever you had the walkthrough?
yeah,
Okay.
well, Rich was there.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So,
Rich Larios is the chairman of the Capital Outlay Committee, just so you know.
I mean, Mark touched on the harbor, and I think that's going to be a big conversation going forward because they have, some significant requests in the capital plan. Some of it's further out. Our big part of it, the Saquoteca, the bulkhead replacements, it's like 10 mil or more, and that's 5 years out, which is going to be before
yeah,
right now probably.
Oh, thank you.
But it's some big numbers coming out of that area
Yep.
in the next several years.
Okay. I think as we go forward, the capital plan, one of the questions always is, it's one thing, and I'm just making this up at the moment, but if you take water or wastewater, for instance, and say, okay, we're gonna go out and we're gonna authorize, pick a number, 150 million, whatever the number is, right? And the next phase or whatever, it does come down to the timing of when you're actually gonna need the money and when you're gonna do it, because it's not something you do in 1 year. It's, probably over 5 years and that type of thing, and I doubt you'd borrow all the money at once, unless there was a good reason to do that, like state participation or whatever. But there will be a timing issue with some of this, and the thing that I always scratch my head about is, can any of these things be delayed even a year?
Right.
I can't imagine what, one of the questions for the finance director I have is, what is the cost of capital if we go out like next year?
Yeah.
Not insignificant.
No, I think if you look at, and just one thing to point out on the capital plan for FY 2024, and I know the one you passed out is close to the numbers I have. This, I think, is a little bit more updated because it has, just picked it up there. But anyway, regardless.
The numbers are wrong as a Dana.
It's very, very
so,
close. So if you look at the total for 2024, it's like 75 million.
Yeah.
And a huge part of that is water and wastewater stuff.
Yeah.
And Dan Pellick, he came and gave a really good sort of discussion with the capital group, and that's a whole different kind of funding model, right? Like that's not normal capital, like if you put it in that way. And then Joe will say like the normal amount of capital that we normally run forward with every year is around, we say 3 million, 3 million. That's about sort of normal what we work off of from a town perspective. Now this plan, just so you know, so if you take 70 million off of 75, that leaves 5 million. And to me, that's where the current capital for 2024 is. And Joe will say, but if you exclude facilities maintenance, which is about 2.5 million, you get down to where the 2 to 3 million where we normally are. And my opinion is you shouldn't exclude that maintenance because that's, to me, it's around 5 million where you're normally around 3. So that's just how his talking points normally go. But I don't think, just as a point of reference, I think that those need to stay in the conversation. We can't put that aside.
They're all things funded by tax dollars.
Right.
Right? And when you get all done at the bottom here, what I think we should care about in the end is what the impact on the tax rate is, basically.
Yeah.
Because it's the people who are gonna pay for this.
Correct.
And what we used to do is, if you're retiring this much debt a year, we try and add on this much in capital and try and keep it level. Of course, wastewater skews that. Things like building a school, big number
for
things
sure.
like $50 million or something really skew it. But that's the idea, is to try and do that,
Yeah, it'd be good to get a look at that because I haven't seen a sort of a complete debt schedule, I don't think, since I joined the finance.
Right, so Michelle, what we have is, just because you're a little bit newer in the town than some of us, but the town has a 5-year capital plan. By the way, it used to be 7 years, thank you very much to myself, but it got changed.
We fixed that.
I know, it got changed back to 5 years for whatever reason.
I'd still like to
But
see 7,
anyhow,
but
it's meant to be,
selfishly.
it's meant to be a look out in the future, in the current year coming up, and then what's gonna follow, so that you can plan for some of these things. So every year, like in 2024, which is the year we're coming into financially, hopefully you'd fund all these items, or you'd approve these items, and then the whole plan would move by a year, and then you add a new year on, and like when 2029 comes on, you add another column and it comes up, and you keep moving along 5 years. Now, some things could get voted down, get delayed, get changed, and the plan gets, modified and adopted every year, so it is a good way to plan for the capital needs of the community. So.
Yeah, I was happy to hear, because I was out for a couple of meetings, but I was happy to hear that for the facilities 1 or 204 specifically, that they were going to add more to it, because we know there's more. And this is the dilemma I have in my own head and when I'm listening to this stuff, because we know more about what's going on at, say, 204 Sisson, and we know there's stuff that's not there. So when you look at the 5-year plan, you go, if there's stuff missing, then that's it. And I understand there's a lot of rationale for why certain things aren't on there at certain times, because they might not have a good enough handle on it. But regardless, I feel the same way about the golf area too, right? Because I've learned enough about that. I know there's all these other projects. There's a handful of other sizable projects brewing that aren't represented there yet, and so that's going to be one of my questions in the meeting on Monday.
Well, part of the question is, do they go beyond the 5-year horizon?
Sure, and I don't think they all do. That's the thing. It's
But even if some do, that's how we used to have a 7-year plan.
right,
but no,
which
it's
is
not.
why I would prefer 7. But my point is that even
See,
some of these
convinced
other
you.
things have to come in within 5 if you know what's
Understand.
going on.
I
So
understand.
for
Well,
everybody,
they don't
we're
have
like,
to, because the taxpayers get the vote on them. So
right.
ideally, in some cases, from a management or logistics standpoint or operational standpoint, yeah, it would make some sense. But ultimately, it comes down to what people want to spend their money on.
Yeah, when we bring it in front of them and get approval for things. So yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's that.
Yeah.
I'm a planner.
Through the chair, question? 2 questions.
Yep.
Does the town have a capitalization policy? I see numbers all over the place on here in terms of size, like what constitutes getting on the capital plan?
$50,000, I think is the threshold, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anything over 50 or above
50 or above, yeah.
would be capitalized by the
Right.
finance department
Right.
Excuse me,
Would be included on this plan.
and would qualify for capitalization.
Should be.
That's what we're assuming. Yeah.
Should be.
Okay. The second question
Yep.
of my 2.
Well, unless you had something you wanted to add to that, Danny.
No, the nuts and bolts of what you just asked is all spelled out in the charter
Yeah.
as to what the definitions are, what the rules of operation are, what happens if a thing fails at town meeting, doesn't get the funding or whatever, how does it come back on the plan? Does it come back on the plan? Those kind of questions are all answered in the actual procedure or the actual document, which is in the charter. It's part of the charter, in the financial section of the charter.
Is the, what was brought up earlier was 204. It has, do we, whoever we is, have an operating view of how 204 functions?
Okay,
Those are
so that was part of what came up at town meeting last year, and that right at the very end with the petition article. And the article, the work of the article is ongoing without extra funding. In other words, not hiring a consultant, but doing it internally. This committee, we thought that we were going to be more intimately involved in that process. The selectmen and town administrator have elected to follow a process where they're gathering their own data, putting something together, and then when this meeting happens on what date?
14. The next,
The divulgence of what the plan
the
is so far.
21st of November.
21st of November. Then we'll all get to hear a little bit more about what's in there. And then between then and town meeting, that plan will get developed further, hopefully, because the commitment to the town on town meeting floor was to bring back a plan as to how, you know, how that facility would be used, what it would take to bring it up to speed, basically, for what the intended purpose is, and then what are the actual operational costs. You know, one of the key points is we rent several spaces there, you know, to the artist community or whomever. And just like in golf, people ask the question, well, is the rent fair or not fair? I don't know, you know, so.
That's absolutely going to be discussed at that 21st meeting, because people, we know that we have like 40 artisans in there, and we have a huge waiting list, which suggests that it's probably pretty reasonable. But anyway, but that's going to be discussed about, should we adjust the rates? Are they?
Well, but it's also, quite frankly, a lot different if you have space as it is now with no air conditioning.
Yeah, for 9 months.
And the space
yeah.
is what it is, basically an abandoned middle school. Well, that's, you know, that says, okay, that's the kind of opportunity, business, whatever that
Yep.
would go in there. If you now invest X amount of dollars, millions of dollars in the building, and now you have air conditioning and this and that, whatever, let's just pretend they have a food court or something, I don't know, whatever, you know, out of this whole thing. Well, then it may say, well, okay, now the space is a much higher quality.
Correct, yeah.
And could attract, you know, more people. And by the way, there's been no attempt to date to change, I don't think, to change the size of the existing classrooms or anything.
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
you know, there may be in one space of a classroom, you end up with two businesses. I have no
Right.
idea.
No, you're right.
But those things need to get worked out. And I think, you know, as I said on town meeting floor, you know, if you get all the numbers put together, and the answer is, making this up, that it would cost me as a taxpayer, let's just say $50 a year to support, you know, the 204. I got to get used to calling it that.
204.
And maybe I look at it and say, well, that's okay, I'm all right doing that. Or maybe I say, no, I think I don't want to do that. So then, you know, it comes on to a vote at some point in time. What do you want to do? So, but until you know the numbers, and the, you know, the true set of numbers, the real set of complete, comprehensive set of numbers, I don't know how to make that decision.
Right.
You know, so be fascinating. Was that your second question?
That was.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
good.
Peter, just one small thing. This has the Sacroteca bulkhead replacement is $1,950,000. What I have here is, it's $10 million.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
$565,000. So there is some major discrepancies on
Yeah,
this versus what Joe's gonna, just,
This is the last published one from the
Okay,
town
so-
administrator.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one I have is literally
So
from
then
the
you're
other
only
day.
off by factor of 4.
But that's a big one. That's the biggest change on the most current plan, just so you know.
Okay, so, but as we go through the process, so for instance, everything that's listed as 2024, that, let's say it all stays in the plan as it is. As we go through the process of the winter and the spring, get ready for town meeting, we're gonna be looking at each one of these things and saying, for instance, do you have a bid price on that? Did you get some quotes on that, or did you throw a dart at the wall? It used to be that you wouldn't take anything to town meeting unless you had quotes. Okay, we may have gotten away from that, I don't know. We're gonna find out as we go through it, right? Certainly when you look at, and I'm not picking on Brooks Academy, but you know, the way they just said at that town meeting a couple of years ago, let's give us $1.2 million or something to do a foundation without a lot of justification. People voted for it, so what can you say, right? But it used to be you had to show up with, you know, here's a set of bids. And by the way, we went through them and we rank ordered them and went through all that evaluation stuff. And by the way, here's the winner, you know, assuming it gets funded. So there's a lot of discussion. You know, we have a financial responsibility to make sure we're protecting the interests of the taxpayers in the town. So I'm sure we'll get into all that. So it'll be fascinating. Angelo, who's been through at least one capital plan that I know of.
Usually when we have a capital plan, we want to know how much whatever we want to do will cost. But always we want to know why the hell we're doing it. And I think one of the problems we have is, why do you want to spend $5 million on that building? Is it going to generate 10 million for us? Is it going to generate 1,000 million for us? Or is it just going to cost us $5 million? And you can't do it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you're just wasting everybody's time.
Right, and by the way, once you spend the 5 million, when's the next time you're gonna have to spend the next 5 million or whatever? I don't know. You have to look at the ongoing
And I
cost.
think we really have to push on getting that information.
Well, I think it's clear, when we get to the joint meeting with the selectmen on December 12th, everybody come with their list of 2 or 3 questions and,
Yeah.
you know, be prepared what your topics, you know, really are, want to be going forward. So that we can make sure we at least plant the seed to get the information we want.
The other thing that's kind of interesting is that as far as I can remember back 10 years, is both the water, the marine water money that comes in at the end of the year comes in with a pile of money more than they spent. And it varies around. And it also happens with the golf course. And that's been happening for, I don't know, 20 years. And what's been done every year is that money is moved quietly into a pile someplace so people will have some funds to play with. I don't think that should work either.
If you were in a normal business, and I know you were, international business, you would say everything has a cost center, right? And you would say, okay, if I have cost centers that aren't turning something for a profit, why do I have them? And it turns out in municipal government, there are some things that are, just call them, are always going to be losses for the good of the community. I'm not going to even try and identify what those are. But, you know, for instance, we need a board of health and we need a health department. If they make money or not, we need them,
Sure.
you know. But you're getting at something a little bit, I think, a little bit deeper and different than that. And you're right. We need to ask those questions. That's our job, you know. And there's nothing wrong with asking those questions, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think it's important because the questions you have with people who are playing golf and have to pay for it, if you see how much money that the company, the town is picking up, then they're going to say you're charging us too much. So it's a balancing act that's in there.
But that's why it's so important to get the numbers right and put them in the right buckets and make sure there's transparency so that, okay, this is what it looks like. Whether you agree with the answer or not, this is what it looks like. So, you know, one could argue at the waterfront, for instance, the harbors, you look at all those fees and whatnot and say, okay, over the years, you know, we've been generating a lot of money. Where did it go? You know, or should it be just saved or allocated for harbor-related things or water-related things to you know, to the detriment of something else? We do have to have police and fire and, you know, that kind of stuff. So, but getting to what the answer is and letting people know, just like the community or 204. If it's $50 a year, hey, I'm in. If it's $500 a year, it's going to cost me. I don't think I'm in, but
Yeah.
and I'm just making those numbers up. I mean, it's just a discussion point.
Yeah, I think on the 21st, you're going to get a pretty clear picture of what they're projecting, like revenue and expense from an operating standpoint based on certain program assumptions.
Sure.
And I think what I'm anticipating at least is they're going to see that third part of the discussion is then the capital, right? Because some of the programs that they want to do require capital. So in order to accomplish this view of revenue and expense, they might need, I don't know, a new gym floor, which is part of what needs to happen there.
Yeah.
But hopefully you're going to start to see that picture come together, and that's why I'm hopeful at this point that we're going to begin to see that level of detail, which is I think what we're all anxious to see, is so that we can just be better informed and be able to have a perspective that's has more information behind it than speculation.
So in preparation for that, as we get a debt schedule from the finance director, I would like a couple of people to start building a model, financial model, as to what the debt schedule actually looks like based on adopting some of these things and some assumptions based on what the cost of capital is going to be and the timing of things, whatever, so we can have a decent understanding or at least an intelligent discussion about, you know, what we think the effect on the taxpayers would be. So I don't know. Anybody want to jump in and work on that?
Oh, I'm going to work on it.
What?
I'm gonna work on it, yeah.
What do you mean you're gonna work on it?
Well, when I get the debt schedule, we'll start doing just what you're talking about.
I mean,
Just have to-
I don't mind helping. I
Yeah.
I wouldn't claim to be an expert on that stuff, but I'd be happy to help.
Who's really good at any kind of graphical analysis of things? Because I always think that a picture is worth 1,000 words. That if you can show things graphically that make sense, it's helpful. I don't know. Michelle, do you have any expertise in that area?
Well, I can certainly.
It might be a good learning experience, maybe
Yeah.
to team up with
Yeah,
Dana, would that be?
absolutely, yeah.
3 of us, maybe we could do something.
Well, I don't want to make a committee, so.
No, I
you
know.
so just be careful. 3 is a committee.
We
so-
can associate and get some stuff done.
And you can always, you should be bringing it back here
Right.
anyhow.
Yeah, that's the
Right,
goal.
right.
And then, having us deal with it, dance with it here, make comments, whatever, before it goes to, whomever we're gonna go to with this kind of thing. Okay?
Excuse me, it's really very simple. You ask the finance director to tell you what money has been put aside for whatever piece you're talking about. And then you ask somebody else, well, how much do you want to spend? And then you have 2 numbers. It's only 2 numbers.
I understand.
And in the olden days, we used to do that on every one of these accounts.
I understand.
And you had 2 numbers. That's where the problem is.
Yeah, and quite frankly, we're starting, as of yesterday, I think, well, we had the finance director in here just for an intro here a couple of meetings ago, but I think starting yesterday, the finance committee is starting to work a relationship with a new finance director, and we just have to work through it, right? I mean, I'm sure it'll be great. She's got to get to understand us, we have to understand her, she has to understand our capabilities, our desires and needs, and we need to understand her capabilities, so.
I mean, just that, what you said, Angela, and I may not understand it well enough, and I've heard it referenced a couple times in the capital, is that what do we have? What's the capital pot look like for next year? And I'm like, I don't understand that totally. I don't think it's just about like what money's available. I don't know.
Some of it is money that may have been borrowed but not fully spent.
Yeah.
In the past.
Yeah.
So let's just make up something. You did a $100,000 project, you borrowed $100,000 for, you only used $82,000. Probably goes the other way most of the time, but you use $82,000.
Yeah.
Okay, you borrowed that money, and you've got a bond or whatever you're paying on. Where does that $18,000 go? Where is it? Does it go to something else?
That's a really good, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of question you need to.
Yeah, I'm real interested to see that because I never saw that last year.
No.
Yeah.
Plus, getting free cash certified and knowing what that number is.
Yeah, because that's
the
not done
biggest-
yet, is it?
That's the biggest pool of money that we use on an annual basis to fund a lot of the
Little stuff, yeah.
2.4 million
Right.
Yeah.
vehicles, a lot of things that can be done with that cash is done each year. So you don't have to borrow.
Yeah, and we had that discussion too. I mean, we're all over the place right now, but the vehicles is a whole different story. Like, should it be on the capital plan or not? Either way, because they have a schedule of how long we'll keep a vehicle or move it to another department and get new ones for all these. The vehicles are huge expense for the town, which makes
Well,
sense.
Dana and I go back to the time when we would fight over every spare tire. I mean, it
Well,
was.
yeah, now
it
it's
was
big numbers.
Unbelievable.
It's a lot of
way back
money that's
when.
going into
Well, highway has 2.8 million in vehicles on the capital plan, and
Yeah, and you look, I mean,
That's
they all.
primarily because Dana has crashed about $3 million worth of vehicles at this point in time.
I know which ones the expensive ones are.
But it's been fascinating on some of them.
There used to be past finance committee members that, wasn't me, but it used to be ones that would crawl under the vans and look at the floorboards before deciding we needed a new one and things like that. There was a lot of effort went into replacing something.
So Angela, you have DPW, so that's your job this year, crawling underneath? That's what it says here.
Go ahead.
Michelle, for your benefit, you're gonna hear some terms like free cash, which right now, it sounds like somebody just gave you a blank check and go have fun. There is a formal definition of free cash and how that all works.
Excess,
and,
yeah.
You know, yeah.
Oh, and the revolving funds too, because that's another one that came up in the 204 discussion about not they have roughly 300 grand in a revolving fund, as I understand it, and so some of the stuff that they're bringing forward into this, all these projects that they need to do that'll be used partially for that also.
I refer to that as the color of money. So money comes in different pots, and I call it different colors. You know, you take the red money, the green money, the purple money, whatever it is, and you know, sometimes it's a combination of things to
Sure.
get something done. You know, and you're trying to do the most cost-effective way of doing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might be doing the most expeditious way of doing it, so maybe you don't have to get some voted. I don't know, you know, but sometimes things are done in combination. So that's just the way it is.
So Peter, I have
Yep.
a question. So just so I understand operationally how things work. So is the liaison for the particular department that's showing an expense on the capital outlay? Is that person responsible for really digging into that line item and understanding what's in there?
No, what you should do is, I mean, what did we sign you up for? Let's see, we signed you up for real estate and open space.
Yeah.
So real estate and open space will end up, they'll have a list of 3 parcels they want to buy, you know, whatever. And it behooves you to just let them know as the finance committee liaison that if they have any questions of the finance committee or want to tell the finance committee anything, or you sense they want to come see us for some reason, great. But you don't have to go walk the 6 acres they're going to buy or that kind of thing, you know. And you don't have to defend it on town meeting floor.
Okay.
All right. So, and we're not meant to be intrusive. We're meant to be an assistant to them if they need it. So some of these you may never see, you know. I mean, it just goes through the normal budget process, and you know, it kind of rolls like that. Others may have some questions that say, hey, what about this? I heard that, you know. But the important thing is they know, like real estate and open space committee, I don't remember off the top of my head who the chairperson is. But just knowing you're the liaison.
Just as an FYI, very often the Real Estate and Open Space Committee will submit an application to CPC for Community Preservation Act monies to purchase a piece of property. So it's just something that you should look out for.
And he was pointing to Bob, I think, because Bob used to be on the CPC for a long time, so.
And Dan and I were both on it together at the same time for a while.
Yep.
So that's why they brought you onto this committee, because you both worked so well together before. Okay, anything else on that topic? As soon as I get a debt schedule from Anne Marie, I'll pass it around just so everybody can see it. And then you guys can start working it, okay? All right.
Oh, that's good.
Budget message from the Board of Selectmen. Dana, you want to give us something on that? I had the clipping from the...
Yeah, they didn't, I just have copies of it. If anybody wants one, you can take one.
Of course they want them.
This is what they're working on. Last night, they discussed it for a while, but they didn't actually do anything with it because the 2 principals weren't there. I need one. Short one?
No.
There you go. Thanks, Dan.
So this is basically a draft. It's
That's a draft of what
not
they're
been
working
approved,
on.
so.
They didn't make any propose or make any changes in it Monday night. So I think they're just in the, and it's late, so I think they're just gonna vote that, but it's their view of what department heads should know as they submit their budget. The department heads are already working on their budget, so it makes it difficult for them to react once they've got it to anything, but that's what's being proposed.
Just a question, is there a patent to the contracts? Like, for example, it's 3-year contract, is it like 3, 5, 5, any sense of the negotiated union contracts?
No, they do 3-year contracts, because if you go outside of that, you have to
Right.
do something different, so
But like the percentage,
They-
what are they?
that's a separate negotiation between the board and the union, and even though it turns out that a lot of them get the same kind of raises all the time, a lot of different unions, that's not etched anywhere. By law, they can't have a map of, this is what we're gonna do over the next 20 years, or 8 years, or 5 years. They can basically just say, we're in the room, what's gonna happen over this? Is it, we looking at a 1-year contract, we looking at a 3-year contract, or that kind of thing? So, no, there's no,
No percentages of what they've got?
Well, usually, Mark, I think the experience is that once they settle with one of the bigger unions, take DPW, I don't know, whatever, that can sometimes be the pacing example. And, sometimes, for instance, when the school contract gets done, because there are a lot of employees at the school, it could be a pacing thing, but there could be certain circumstances where they want to deviate from that for some reason. Like maybe in the past, that particular union didn't get what it wanted, so it wants to catch up, or, sometimes people value the first year more than they do the last 2 years. It goes all over the place.
Yeah, I just want to know if there's...
It's just how it works, but, those negotiations, we had nothing to do with those negotiations, and we have to deal with the results of them because it impacts, the operating budget, if you will.
and it's right off the top, because it's something you have to pay first.
It's always better to have contracts settled before you get into the actual new year for an operating budget, because then you know what the numbers are, as opposed to guessing what the numbers might be. So, and we had a small one at the special town meeting that covered the management employees, whatever. It was like, what, $20,000?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of minor in the scheme of things, but imagine if you didn't have a school contract and you had to go back and, cover 6 months or a year, be a big number. Okay, anything else on the budget message?
No, once they finalize it, then we can tear it apart, but that's just a direction to
Yeah, thank
the
you.
different departments as to how to prepare your budget.
It'd be
biggest-
interesting if they actually do the accounting of 3 years worth of projected versus actual revenues. I mean, that'd be
Yeah.
fascinating to look at.
I mean, we've had discussions already about revenues and how to forecast them and so forth, so the fact that they're getting into it as well, maybe they're getting into it because we did, but the fact that they're getting into it as well helps it that we can both establish a position and follow it. That's the biggest thing, because there has been no real structure to it in the past. When Angelo's talking about departments that make money, there are certain rules that says departments can't make too much money, or you have to lower their fees. Not departments, but like golf. And it has been brought to town meeting before, and I think it was particularly with golf back in the Jim Noonan days, where they questioned whether the golf was making too much money, and they had to go out and show that they were making what they were spending plus 10%, which is allowed for the indirect costs, the accounting of everything, and the making the payroll and all the stuff that the other departments do.
I mean, that could come up again, right? Because they just, like I said, we're going through, Director of Golf is proposing new rates for next year, and
Right.
when the golf committee voted on it, although it's just a sort of an advisory vote, they can't make the decision,
Right.
obviously. They voted 3-3 because it was a huge discussion. There was a lot of the public there, and people don't want the rates to go up. You know what I mean? Like, and they're not even asking.
You mean golfers,
Yeah.
not people?
Well, some of the golfers.
No, I mean, the customers don't want the rates to
Yeah,
go up,
but
right?
but there were times, like, it's just, and it goes into what you were saying. If we're making over 600 grand a year, why would you raise the cart rate $2? Whatever.
Right.
You know, because that's
Right.
like $8,000 a year. Why don't we just absorb it and not do that? But it's not that black and white, I guess is the point.
There's a
It's very gray.
I forget which town did it. One town put together a real good 10 things you should ask when you're talking about doing something at town meeting or in changing rates or something like that. There's, why are you doing it? How much is it gonna raise? What are you gonna do with that money? Those kinds of things should be asked every time. And here, those things are never asked. How much is it? Because if you don't put that money into the revenue when you declare that money, then you don't get to spend it. If you raise a fee to a higher fee, but you don't also raise the projection on what that's gonna bring in, then that extra money that you raise the fee for just goes into free cash the following year. It's like you didn't do anything with it. You
Yeah,
raised it
it's-
for a purpose, but didn't do
Right.
it.
It's a lot of
You didn't
interest,
satisfy the need.
a lot of interesting discussion about that kind of a model where
Yeah.
it brings in good, a decent amount of revenue and all that versus a different type of
Right.
or group or that doesn't have the revenue side of it.
Yeah, okay, on the other item on documents and reports we want from the town, by the finance director, I'll remind you all that at our August 11th meeting, we gave the town administrator a list of several items. I'll just run through them. Reports that we wanted available, certainly before we start the budget process. And they're in the minutes.
Yeah.
Capital outlay plan, which is being worked. The vehicle list for all municipal vehicles, Dana's favorite subject. Debt schedule, operating budget, current budget, proposed budget, past budget, actual 2 years, and that's sort of what they're getting to in here. Operating budget detail for salaries and wages, expense and capital, old articles. Old articles being sometimes articles don't spend all their money or
But don't start the project.
they don't start the project or something happens and that money just sits there. Well, why let it sit there, bring it back and let's put it in the pot so we can use it instead of raising taxes. Instead of raising new money, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Our receipts, current year, proposed year, previous year, budget versus actual, recap sheet. Dana, you may want to explain just what the recap sheet is once I get done.
Yep.
Overlay 5-year history, current year, proposed year, and OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, when people retire or whatever, the current status and future obligations. That's the list that we gave to Joe based on the feedback I had today. I will be asking directly of the finance director to get those documents, and Karen, I'll try and set up a meeting where you and I can
That'd
sit
be
down and
awesome,
say
yeah.
what it is. So,
That'd be great.
so is everybody okay with that? We'll go in that direction until it doesn't work, right? So I'll try and
I
get
think
that,
it's a great idea.
get that set up. All right, Dana, you want to tell us something about recap sheet?
Yeah, and just as an aside, I know earlier you talked about, I'll start putting together at least what I think of as examples of those documents we're looking for, things we've gotten in the past and to the level of detail, because I have all the old budget books and stuff. But the recap sheet is done every year by the financial team downstairs, and it starts with the tax levy every year, and I'll send one of these out too. And it has last year's tax levy and this year's tax levy. Well, how did you get to that number? Well, it's the tax levy plus your new growth plus 2.5%, and that gets to your new tax levy. And then on top of that is a 3% surcharge that we have in Harwich to become CPC funds.
Right.
So that's where that number comes from. So it's just an accounting of it. And then our cherry sheet aid, and then our cherry sheet expenses. And you find out that Harwich has more expenses generally than they have aid. So we end up usually having a deficit or a very low number. And then from that, they can start to build what would be a budget number. You add in your receipts on top of your taxes, and those are the two numbers we pull everything out of each year. And it's up to the $80 million range for this cute little town of 12,000 people.
13,000 people, yeah.
And they have to
See,
come up
that's
with
why we
it
don't worry
every
about
single
spare
year.
tires anymore, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say
But
that's.
it's a real good,
long gone.
especially if you do if you put in the plus signs and the minus signs and stuff as to how you go down the chain to get to each number and stuff. It really is a helpful document for the Finance Committee on municipal finance. So
Sounds
I'll
good.
send that around to everybody. But that's one I always look for every year to.
Every month when we meet, we're going to give you a quiz.
It gets worse, don't worry.
Okay, anything else on that?
No.
All right, revolving funds, Danny, you had something about that.
Yeah, let's do some handouts. I'll take some that way, and if you wanna take some that way.
I don't think I have enough.
No, that's yours.
Here, you take,
That's that way.
you go that one. Look at this, all this paper.
There's lots of paper, thank you.
So this is one I asked to go on the agenda for this week, this month. If you remember at last Springtown meeting, Don Howell got up during this article and said that it's really something that he wanted the board to look into and to get more into how much is there and how it's being used and all that kind of stuff. And I got up right behind him and said, I think that's a great idea. And it's probably the one thing we've ever agreed on in the past 20 years, 22 years that I know of.
You make a point of
So
saying that.
no, I did make a point of it at town meeting because it's very unusual to us agree on the same thing, Mr. Howell and I, but we both have a lot of respect for what we do. And so I put together a couple of documents. One is kind of what was voted at the last town meeting for the town revolving funds, and you can see it's $1.2 million worth of money in the revolving funds. And it has, Karen, you were asking about balances. This is as of a certain date, but it does have balances in there in the far right-hand column of what's in there right now. And like you can see for the Golf Pro Shop and Restaurant, there's, you know, $228,000.
But I don't know, just as a point of reference, I don't know how that relates, if it relates at all to those golf improvement fund and the
Right,
golf, the
right,
infrastructure.
exactly.
I don't, those are the questions I have,
Yeah,
yeah.
you just know it's a number.
Yeah, yep.
So, Don and I had the opportunity to just run into each other and talked about it a little bit, and we decided that we actually wanted to try and do something. You can see the second page there is what, this one is 10 years old. That's what's the revolving funds were 10 years ago, and it's like, there's 6 of them, and it's like much lower amount of money. You know, it's like 300 and something thousand.
Actually, 5 of them.
5 of them, and it's
Total,
lower
yeah.
money. And then 20 years ago, there were none of them.
Right.
I think in
Right.
2007 is when the Water Enterprise Fund came around, and then most of these revolving funds started coming after that. But the biggest concern that I see is that when you have a revolving fund, there are 2 things I just don't like about it as a town taxpayer. One, all of that money can be spent without appropriation. Money comes in and they spend it out. And it's through their programs and stuff. If they decide they want to add a program, they can. If they want to decide to do something different. And when you were talking about the 204, you know, there's a lot of money there, $300,000 that has come in that they haven't figured out legally how to spend it out yet. So they've got to do some stuff there. But it could be spent on anything. It's almost like the school budget. They can spend it on whatever they want, and we don't have a say. We just give them a lump sum amount. So in discussing it with Mr. Howell, he wants to get into it more. So his approach is that he is going to ask at the next Board of Selectmen meeting, it's going to be on the agenda, to be appointed as a committee of 1 to start looking into it and to work with someone here on the Finance Committee. So I'm going to ask this board if I could be appointed as a committee of 1 to go into it from this. And what we're going to do is just find out, first put together a real good synopsis of the history, and then a real good synopsis of how the money's being used, and then whether or not some proposals to move more of it back into the general fund instead of through a revolving fund could or should be done. Just ideas, but it will give us a good basis to work from. And just to expand a little bit on the history, I was chairman for years of what was then called the Recreation and Beach Commission. It was before Rec and Youth, and then later Rec and Youth. But there, if you wanted to have a program or do something, you had to budget it. You had to think, how many kids are going to play T-ball next year? Well, I think there's going to be 60. Well, the hats are this much set, and you have to figure out how much hats are and the shirts are and you'd budget it. Well, now they do all that through a revolving fund. And the second biggest problem with that is nothing comes back to the town for that. They do that, their program and so forth, but the people who track it all, account for it all, pay the bills, put together the warrants, account for everything, collect the money eventually, the treasurer's office, the town doesn't get any of that back. It doesn't go into the general fund where some of it can be used and appropriate. There's always a profit on a lot of those programs. It's not a big profit, but there's a profit because you have to cover your costs. Well, none of that gets put into the general fund. And when you're talking 5 of them, it's not that big a deal. When you're talking this many for $1.2 million, you know, there should be another 100,000 that goes into the general fund somehow from that. And that's just their total ceiling. As long as they're staying underneath that, they keep rolling, you know, they just keep bringing money in and spending money out underneath that ceiling.
Dan's got the answer.
Dan's got the answer.
Trying to figure out what the difference is between the top table and the bottom
Yeah.
table.
The date,
Pardon me?
ending date.
Ending
One's
date.
December 31st, 2021, the top one's June 30th, so, I mean, that's what I say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
they were just trying to show a balance change and so forth.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
what I'm asking this board is to allow me to work with Dawn and see if we can, one, put together the history of it, put together how it's currently being used, and then maybe, and bring it back here. And he'll be bringing it back to his board, ideas on what we think could happen as far as making some changes to, not to eliminate it. It's a great way to help these departments when you say you're gonna have a T-ball for 60 kids and 80 kids show up, and you didn't budget for that, you budgeted for 60, how do we do the other 20? Things like that, to fix things like that. Or all of a sudden, the new rage for young people is a new thing out there, and, you know, for $8 a piece, we can get our kids involved in it. It's a brand-new thing, it's not budgeted for, you can use the revolving fund
What
for
is
that.
that new thing?
So I'm not, huh?
What
I
is
don't
that
know.
new thing?
I don't know.
It seems logical for a department that has programs that drive revenue, but I'm not sure I see it seems like
Well,
there's,
it's a convenient mechanism.
it seems like a great mechanism for them,
Because think
yeah.
about if you had to really put together a budget for how many shirts and hats you're gonna have, and what the cost is
Yeah.
gonna be, and you go do it, and then suddenly you find out either the price went up, the cost
Yeah.
went up, or the number of kids went up or down or whatever, and now you don't have the funds to do it. The revolving fund is like, okay, they're running their own little business, sort of, think about that. And some of these things,
Well,
quite
all
frankly,
three
like with youth and rec, do happen on a periodic basis. It's not usually a one-shot deal. I mean, so that's how I think
Yeah,
these
a
things
lot of-
came to expand. They kind of looked around, and some other folks said, hey, why don't I could use a revolving fund. It would be handy for me, so.
I
Yeah,
think
that-
in
that's
the
what I'm
last
getting
10
at. If
years,
you
many,
have-
many new revolving funds have been added, and the numbers have gone up. Like 10 years ago, it was $80,000 for recreation. Now it's 175.
Right.
Yeah,
What are they doing with that?
I
What-
actually just saw the golf revitalization one, it's just put it on here, but, and you go, why do you need 2? But the question is there groups that, and I don't know this, I'm assuming there's some of these people don't have like, a revenue or programs that they offer and like drive revenue, and therefore why would they need one? Would be my question. I don't need an answer, it's just a question. And then my last thing is, did we not last year or within the past year approve a ceiling for the revolving fund for each of,
That's what these numbers are. That's their ceilings.
the number where?
The limit.
Column A.
First column is their
Okay, I
ceilings.
didn't see that. So that is the ceiling that we approved at the town meeting or wherever we did it. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So the ceilings have gone up, the numbers have
got it.
gone
Thank
up.
you.
All of these departments have budgets that they have to submit, and why can't it include some of these yearly programs that just go on every year that, I mean, some of these programs, and I'll just pick on recreation because I used to be in that. have been going on 30 years, and they know how many kids are gonna be there, basically, and what it's gonna cost. And this year they're doing hats, next year they're doing T-shirts, and this year they're doing hats, and it just goes on and on. So we wanna find the nuts and bolts of it and figure out if there's anything we could do or should do. Maybe there's nothing we should do. But again, it's not to eliminate it, it's not to, it's to make sure that the town is protected from a citizen point of view as to the cost of running these programs.
Okay, Dan has the answer again.
Oh, I have another question.
The spending limits are established at town meeting, correct?
Yes, that's what these are. These are articles right from the warrant.
For example, I'm looking at cultural sector. Their spending limit is $225,000. And their balance at the end of the year is $327,000.
Right.
Wouldn't you want to take the difference and
Yeah.
deposit that into the general fund?
Maybe. I mean, that's.
Right now,
that's
there's
part
no
of
mechanism
consideration.
to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They just keep revolving it. It keeps going.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're saying that, are you also saying there's not a clear accounting of what was spent in that
Oh,
year?
no, I'm not saying that at all. There is an exact accounting.
So you would know
as
if
to
they
what
are
was
getting
spent and
close to
how
the
it was spent.
225, yeah?
And it's checked quarterly, and
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
sign-offs and stuff. I'm not questioning that at all.
Great.
I'm just saying that, like, I think, and I'm not 100% sure on this one, I think on pickleball, which was a new one that was added, that in their fee schedule for pickleball, they include $5 for each person that signs up that goes to the general fund. So that helps to cover some of the administrative costs of the program. But there aren't many of those. Most of the programs that are run don't have some sort of mechanism like that, where part of the proceeds goes to the town.
Right.
All right, so look, if you folks are okay with it.
That's my request.
I would say subject to the selectmen actually appointing Don Howell to work with someone from the finance committee to do this, that Dana would be the one who would have them work with. You guys okay with that? I don't think we need to
Totally,
vote that, but,
yes, absolutely.
okay. All right, anything else on that
I
topic?
was hoping you'd do it. No. never mind.
Okay, any other business? Any other business? Okay, hearing none, I'll remind you, a December 5th joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, where the capital plan will be presented. That'll be in the Griffin Room. I'm assuming
It's a big
6
meeting,
o'clock.
yeah.
I'm assuming 6 o'clock. Dana, make sure we're posted for that.
Yep.
Okay. And then our next regularly scheduled meeting will be 2 days, or 3 days later, December 8th. Either in this room, or if we're able to get over in the community center, a little bigger room, we might do that, so.
Yeah, I'll look into
We
that
will
too.
see.
And just as a sweet aside, that will be my last meeting in person for a while. I'll be on the road for the next several meetings to
So if you
just
want,
call in.
if you want to attack Dana, your last
Sign your
chance
travels.
is December 8th.
Bring in all your
Wow.
binders with you, so in case
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have to
I'll be
reference
shipping
that.
documents. All I have to do is hit send on that thing.
Careful what you wish for and what you wish for. So.
What's that?
In a second. Okay, is everybody set?
Yeah, that was
All right.
good
I'm gonna
stuff.
call an adjournment, okay? At whatever time, 7:17, and just sit tight until the camera goes off.